Welcome to the course of British novel. We are reading Tom Jones. Let's start with the Unit 2 as we first read Tom Jones. The structure in it is objectives, introduction, a reading of Tom Jones, a look at Tom's story, problematic nature of Squire Allworthy, the philosopher and the clergyman, their comic nature. What does Tom symbolize? Relationships in the novel. Tom and Sophia in togetherness and contrast. Tom as Squire Western's companion and friend. The father-daughter angle. Let us sum up glossary questions. Objectives. There is always a difference between the first and the second readings of a text. The first brings forth a kind of initiation into the work. The second, on the other hand, brings up closer to a number of hidden features of the work. Before I present here a brief version of Tom Jones, which I may call just a reading, I wish to make a few preliminary remarks about this novel. To me, it is fundamentally a novel about the social structure that prevailed in England in the middle of the 18th century. The preliminary discussion will not only help in recapitulate some of the main features of relationships, characters, events in Tom Jones, but will also help establish a base for more detailed discussion in subsequent units. Introduction. Let us use Tom's story as an entry point into this extremely complex novel. First, Tom's character by itself would not acquaint us much with the spirit and energy that the novel in its totality embodies. In fact, Tom's character should be used as a point of entry into the novel and no more. In this way, we would be able to win familiarities with what can be termed the truth of this work and an acquaintance with incidents and happenings in Tom's life will reveal to us the conditions of existence at the time the novel was written. Secondly, we witness in Tom Jones gradual unfolding of complexities for building the society of period operated at a number of levels and these would not easily be identified in their peculiar working. Fielding does not make simple connections between different things in life, since his purpose as a writer is not to offer complexions and answers, not to offer explanations and answers. He does the opposite and makes the reader feel the pressure in the 18th century society are far too difficult for any individual to cope with, whatever the person's strength or capability. The social establishment is not only rigid and oppressive, but also extremely powerful. Its value system is also firmly entrenched in the psyche of the pupil. We realize the novel sharply focuses upon a peculiar energy generated in human behavior, one energy with the system pupil criticize, fight, and rebel. Tom's anarchic revolt in Sophia's adamant posture, notwithstanding the final picture, emerging anarchistic revolt and Sophia admit, emerging out of this process hardly encouraging or inspiring. With Tom and Jade and Sophia locked indoors in Western's house, the last page of the novel present a grim account. Of course, we see a movement against hindrance, however problems multiply with each new development. This results in the gripping of the forces hostile to the peculiar social energy I talk of. The reader is given to feel that this energy is not properly harnessed. In fact, narrow orthodox formalities, the moral religious system, patriarchy, etc. create serious obstructions in its way. As the novel progresses, the reader helplessly watches that the agents of the status quo, Bliff, Square, Fickham, Square Western, consciously thwart and possibility of challenge to the interest of property and privilege. A clear sense of dismay is discernible at the end, with Fielding failing to offer any real answer to the questions posed in the novel. In such a situation, the another author would perhaps provide only a comic solution. The question I want to pose is this a success or failure of the author? A reading of Tom Jones, a look at Tom's story. The novel has been given the title Tom Jones at the obvious level. The book is a story of Tom's life from the time he was born till the time he married Sophia. Let us take a glance at some important points raised to the depiction of Tom's life. The novel opens with the discovery of a young male child in the bed of Squire Allworthy. The child is given the name Tom Jones and is referred to as a bastard, an obvious object of ridicule, rejection, and condemnation. The discovery puzzles and confuses the moralistic traditional society at the time. The disturbed individuals and families of the place failed to adopt a systematic attitude towards Tom, Mr. Allworthy being the only expectation to the rule. This great benefactor accepted the child as his own and gives good reasons in spite of his discretion. Allworthy's nephew, Master Blifil and Jones share the generosity of the benefactor equally. The treatment that the two get bears testimony to Allworthy's sound principle of Christian behavior, and the reader is reassured that Jones would receive proper upbringing and care. The answer, therefore, to Jones' problem of preservation comes, as we see, from a good and understanding Christianity, which unhappily is beyond the scope of most of the inhabitants of the place. What also strikes us is that Mr. Allworthy, because of his privileged position, could alone rescue the helpless foundling from difficult circumstances. It would have been totally different if Mr. Allworthy, the good Christian and an example of moral rectitude, were an ordinary person. We witness that Allworthy's decision to adopt the child starts up a whole series of loud and not so loud protests, as well as suspicions about the motives. The question empathetically asked many a time in the novel isn't Mr. Allworthy's own son, since the questioning and ever-suspecting people of the household, nothing else can explain the latter's action. Allworthy's decision to adopt Jones is undoubtedly an act of transgression in traditional moral terms. More, it clearly touches upon economic aspects such as the inheritance of land and money, the world, landed property, and privilege has so far used Christianity to legitimize its existence and has pushed higher virtues beyond the purview of common people, although it shocks the privileged people by consciously selecting the contrary way of interpreting his religion. Problematic nature of Squire Allworthy. However, we become conscious of a certain kind of pompousness in Allworthy. We note that he stands alone in the novel and enjoys a status high enough to be accepted as a moral judge of everything happening in his neighborhood. Standing alone is not a happy situation. It denies to the person concerned a sense of involvement and participation in the common occurrence of life, placed at a distance from everywhere. Allworthy would know only that which he pursued in others. This can create problems of comprehension and consequent taking up discussions. There is no denying that he may carefully go into the issues faced by the people at large and offer sound advice to them, but this, as we have seen, places him on a high pedestal, by virtue of which he preaches to others rather than sharing with them the high principles of morality. Earnestness and sincerity of purpose give him a sense of superiority by which everyone at Somersetshire remains outraged. What I wish to emphasize is that interpreting situations in the light of Christian goodness and benevolence is Allworthy's thought and an active principle in his behavior. On the other hand, standing apart from common action, disinterestedness and impersonal attitude come to mind in this context, and judging in the strength of reason and kind intention was indeed a value in the age of enlightenment. We become a bit puzzled, therefore, to see that Allworthy misguides things quite frequently in the novel. When he does this, he becomes acquainted with the great irony of which Fielding is an acknowledged master. Consider, for instance, the statement of Allworthy: "Even a child, it is my power as a magistrate to punish whoever very rigorously per what you have done, and you will perhaps be the more apt to fear I should execute that power, because you have in a manner laid your sins at my door par. So, as no private resentment should ever influence a magistrate, I will be so far from considering your having deposited the infant in my house as an aggravation of your offence. What I will suppose in your favour this to have proceeded from a natural affection to your child. I should indeed have been highly offended with you had you exposed the little wretch in the manner some inhuman mothers, who seem no less to have abandoned their humanity, than to have parted with your chastity. It is the other part of your offence, therefore, upon which I intend to admonish you. I mean the violation of your chastity, a crime, however lightly it may be treated by dependent people, very heinous in itself and very dreadful in its consequences. The heinous nature of this offence must be sufficiently apparent to every Christian, inasmuch as it is committed in defiance of the laws of our religion and express commands of him who founded the religion." Here the author deliberately chosen to withhold from Allworthy the true information about Jones' parentage. Having done this, he has given full freedom to the speaker to delight upon the ills and evils of immoral behavior, in addition, perhaps such as abandoned the humanity, violation of your chastity, him who founded that religion, etc., and stole the promiscuity of Allworthy's unmistakably. We should also keep in mind the view the novel as a whole is to take a critical look at chastity, constancy, humanness, and kind sympathy with Jones, seen as learning about them in the raw as he grows up. The author administers a series of shocks through Jones' conduct in difficult life situations. In fact, under the bold scheme of author, Allworthy is going to be throughout manipulated by Blifil, an aspect designed to show the hollowness of abstract principles which we uncritically adopt. The philosopher and clergyman, their comic nature. From here, we move to the situation in which the job of imparting moral intellectual guidance to Tom is assigned to Squire and Tucum by Allworthy. The author has convinced and drowned these two comically, while Squire projects the secular, atheistic outlook and lays stress on correct and consistent human behavior. Tucum understands everything in strictly religious terms. There are so much given to a mechanical representation of principles and ideas that every remark they make amuses the reader. Fielding uses the term a plan, which is to provide through them an entertaining discourse on trivial as well as important matters at the time, and Mr. Allworthy faced from time to time. So founder of the philosopher and clergyman of pronouncing judgment are offering analysis that they never once sit back and ponder. Instead, they rush in to offer their simple predictable views. This is an example of how educators come to obstruct the mental growth of a pupil in his side. Ironically, Mr. Allworthy feels quite satisfied with the argument he has made for the moral education of Tom and Blifil. The writer's plan, under which Square and Tokyo work, has another aspect to it, as the two teachers go about their business of leading the pupil onto the path of enlightened behavior. They gradually come to serve a purpose other than comic and being to seriously influence the action in the novel. This compels the reader to think that the consequences of their real conduct would be sinister. For instance, their attempt at winning the attention of Mrs. Blifil is not merely comic. It is true that in this venture both Square and Tokyo prove to be foolish, while Bridget emerges as a clever manipulator. Still, the episode is too damning for the philosopher as well as the preacher. Can such people fulfill the charge which Mr. Allworthy has given them? In fact, combined with the conspirational skills of Blifil, the practice of Square and Tokyo can quite comparatively mislead Mr. Allworthy himself, who apparently is the redeeming deity of the novel. Still, the end of the novel, Allworthy keeps the reader impressed by his alert and sharp intellect, and yet much remains unachieved. In fact, Blifil at most brings about the destruction of Tom and sets at note the happy prospectus of Sophia. We therefore conclude that Square and Blifil can become part of the big evil machine of the novel, and that their comic nature turns more and more dangerous and therefore uncomic as events unfold in Tom Jones. What does Tom symbolize? Tom's character stands out in the novel as one which is entirely unformed. He appears to be a mere lump of clay. It is the classic inability to adhere to a given code, since he would not understand its worth or relevance. It is a different thing that by nature he is kind and generous. Yes, nature is the word. Therefore, good is not good and desirable. Verse in his case, instead, it is natural for him to be good, as the reader seems Tom suffers a great deal by being naturally good and selfless. It is entirely understandable, therefore, that convictions, traditions, and norms do not mean anything to him, but as so many minor hurdles in the way. We are particularly struck by Tom attitude towards women. Tom always treats women, irrespective of their social standing, as equal to men. His behavior in this context is not influenced by that exploitative attitude under which the males are supposed to manage the affairs of society, and women how to merely act as their appendages. He contains within himself the purity of a human, than the distinctive trait of a male, which can be taken as a gender construct of a given society. The human in Tom constitutes the essential good qualities both of man and women. In fact, in some respects, one can see more of women than the man in him, the softer, purer, more honest, and empathy-prone aspects that we have come to historically associate with a woman's temperament. Apart from this, he can scarcely apprehend that people would act under narrow considerations of profit, and on that account take advantage of anyone's gullibility and innocence. But as noted above, innocence in Tom's strong point, it is that which sets him apart from these people of high as well as low birth, who have become uninnocent in the process of living. Still another trait of Tom's character is that he greatly encourages and fearless and has requested strength to go ahead in the business of fighting. He would more often than not be able to conquer his enemy if engaged in a fight with him. So many qualities can be merely visualized in an individual. It is this which suggests that Tom emerges in the novel more as an idea, as separate than a flesh and blood character. I say idea, not an ideal. The latter are connotations of fineness, something which is already there for the human beings to look up to, something like that we find in Mr. Allworthy's case. No, Tom is not that kind of an ideal. On the contrary, Tom exemplifies the idea of spontaneity and natural behavior as an idea. Tom also critiques that which is determined to the natural good aspect of people. If Tom's character is to be interpreted thematically, he can be viewed as that idea of spontaneity which remained in a state of constant struggle with the pre-existent structure of norms and convictions.